Good afternoon, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and here is your evening update on Tropical Cyclone Alfred, a powerful and dangerous tropical cyclone situated offshore from southeast Queensland. This is a significant threat to both Brisbane, the Gold Coast, and the northeastern corner of New South Wales, so pay close attention if you are interested in the details from Tropical Cyclone Alfred, which is still expected to make a landfall or crossing of the Queensland coastline sometime in the next 48 hours as a Category 2 strength tropical cyclone. We're going to be talking all things landfall details and intensification of this tropical cyclone in the next 15 minutes, so stick around to the end of the video if that's your cup of tea. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing and also click the join button down below to get access to some exclusive perks. But let's jump straight into things right now with a look at Tropical Cyclone Alfred, a Category 2 strength system, as mentioned, moving very slowly through the southern reaches of the Coral Sea offshore from the southeastern corner of Queensland. In fact, it's hardly moved at all over the last 6 hours. You can see it's blowing up some really decent convection in the southern quadrant of this tropical cyclone. It's really looking healthy on the southern side in terms of the tropical cyclone's intensification. Plenty of rainfall, plenty of thunderstorms in the southern side, which is quite concerning if you are a Queenslander right now. And they're becoming more and more robust as the hours tick by and more solid around the southern side of the system, which is a surefire sign of intensification. You'll also be able to feel this, especially if you live along the Gold Coast and into the northeastern corner of New South Wales, that there is some significant banding features wrapping around into the coastline at this time. You can see them here moving through the Gold Coast right now, and whilst the rainfall is still very quickly moving and it's just coming in bands, they're becoming a lot thicker and a lot more closer together in terms of their frequency, and certainly the weather there is now rapidly deteriorating, and it is now time to hunker down and protect yourself and family from Tropical Cyclone Alfred. It is arriving along the Queensland coastline right now, even though landfall is still and expected at least 24 hours, probably closer to about 36 hours away from occurring. Let's jump into what's going on down in the Gold Coast right now. You can see wind observations, Tweed Heads 40 kilometres an hour, gusting up to about 70. Gold Coast Seaway, same deal there, 30 k's an hour, gusting to 70. Stronger winds as you get up towards Russell Island, then even stronger winds into the Moreton Bay area, with wind gusts there approaching 70 kilometres an hour as well. Strong wind gusts up on Moreton Island as well. You can see a ship out here parked well offshore from the Queensland coastline or travelling into the Queensland area with winds of 85 kilometres an hour, and this is outside of the tropical cyclone's inner core, with gusts there up to 110 kilometres an hour confirmed. So this tropical cyclone is certainly of Category 2 proportions right now, with estimated peak sustained winds as a result of this weather station here on the ship at about 135 to 140 kilometres an hour. Very powerful indeed. Significant winds also being reported south towards Byron Bay, Cape Byron at 72 kilometres an hour, gusting into the hundreds now. Certainly is very windy, that's for sure, and this heavy rainfall continuing through this afternoon is only expected to get heavier as the hours go on. Let's jump into the forecast in this system right now. I'm just going to keep it short and sweet because we know, generally speaking, what's going to happen. There's been a lot of confusion today with what Tropical Cyclone Alfred is going to be doing. We're expecting it to get itself moving as we head into the later hours of tonight into early tomorrow morning, and it will be on final approach to the Queensland coastline by the looks of things by tomorrow morning into early tomorrow afternoon. Certainly on final approach by tomorrow afternoon. You can see those dangerous cyclonic conditions approaching the Queensland coastline by about 7 or 8 o'clock local time in Queensland and about 6 o'clock actually locally in New South Wales. The conditions will arrive about an hour earlier for New South Wales, regardless of the time difference. I'm pretty sure they're still in daylight saving, but those gnarly tropical cyclone conditions will be arriving first for Byron Bay, Cape Byron, and up towards Tweed Heads and Coolangatta, and then a couple of moments later, out towards about an hour or two later, actually around the Gold Coast Seaway area, those gnarly conditions will be arriving into late tomorrow morning. The conditions will rapidly deteriorate through tomorrow by the looks of things, and then by around tomorrow afternoon, we're expecting full-blown tropical cyclone conditions around the Gold Coast to continue through Friday evening, and you can see the Eastern Weather forecast, even though it's calling for a pretty funky track, that's for sure, calling for that landfall early Saturday morning on North Stradbroke Island. Between other forecast models, the landfall site has been locked in, probably most likely at this point on North Stradbroke Island. The other forecast models have been really confusing over the last couple of days. The GFS ensemble is suggesting that the most likely landfall site will be on North Stradbroke Island, which has changed dramatically throughout the course of today from just the GFS forecast model alone, but at this point that does look to be the most likely landfall site, which, as I'll get to in a later part of this video, will bring in the worst conditions behind this system. Now, after that landfall, which is likely to happen between 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon and 4 a.m. on Saturday morning, that's a wide range of uncertainty, but considering the tropical cyclone's slow-moving and rather unpredictable nature, that's the best we can do right now with that landfall being, I repeat, between 4 p.m. Friday and 4 a.m. on Saturday, the 8th of March, most likely closer towards midnight on Saturday at this point here. That's just my personal prediction on North Stradbroke Island. It could go as far north as Moreton Island as well, or the southern reaches of Moreton Island, and it could go as far south as South Stradbroke Island, but a landfall on South Stradbroke Island is now looking relatively unlikely before heading inland through Redland City and then in towards Brisbane by early on Saturday morning. Most major forecast models in a big favour of that solution. You can see moving into the Brisbane metro area by early Saturday morning and then into Saturday afternoon. The remnant energy dying off around Ipswich and the remnant energy being dragged a little bit further inland as this tropical cyclone then begins to really kill itself as it gets over towards the Toowoomba area. This tropical cyclone is certainly going to be a very significant impact, and I don't want to be using such aggressive words with this tropical cyclone, but it is certainly going to be a once in a generation experience of parts of southeast Queensland, and it could even be once in a lifetime experience for some of these locations here. Tropical Cyclone Alfred, I cannot stress enough just how powerful this tropical cyclone is, and it also is quite uncertain at this time. The Icon forecast model has been calling for some really weird stuff as well. They're calling for that landfall to happen later on Saturday. The Access forecast model, which I'm actually a big fan of right now in terms of their initial forecast, but considering it's a convective based forecast model, it is a little bit more harder to believe sometimes, but they're calling for that landfall late on Friday on North Stradbroke Island before moving in around midnight into the Redland City area and then into very early Saturday morning into the Brisbane metro area. And the convective models also backing that same situation as well, with the landfall very late on Friday and then moving in towards the Brisbane area by early Saturday morning. But again, still a lot of discrepancies in the forecast that need to be ironed out over the next couple of hours. And we just need to wait to see when Alfred is going to get itself moving for us to know exactly when and where this landfall is going to be, because it is still stalling out here just because of a lack of steering currents, which are the things that direct the tropical cyclone's motion. There's nothing really directing this tropical cyclone around, and that's why we've seen such an erratic track and such a stalling, slow-moving motion from this tropical cyclone. Once it gets itself moving, if it does get itself moving in the next couple of hours, because if it is staying still here for the next 24 hours, it's going to completely cark it offshore from Queensland, which is the best case scenario right now. Still highly unlikely, but definitely the best case scenario. And so when this system does get itself moving, we'll know exactly when and where it's going to be making landfall, more or less to the absolute best of our ability. And just cross-referencing that right now with the landfall track, because I know that is definitely the most important part of this forecast right now. This is what the bomb is expecting. That landfall there is a Category 1 strength tropical cyclone on Moreton Island, but it'll still be a Category 2 as it passes north of North Stradbroke Island, delivering Category 2 strength tropical cyclone conditions as far south as Cape Byron. By the looks of things, it's still an extremely powerful and equally dangerous tropical cyclone threat regardless of where this makes landfall. It will just have a minor impact on where these conditions are going to be. And that's why I've hammered home the details around this landfall and why I am emphasizing the fact that we still don't exactly know where this tropical cyclone is going to be making landfall, because pretty much everything else is more or less set in stone. Even though the tropical cyclone's landfall is generally speaking set in stone at this time, which is good news because we know where and what conditions are going to be coming through for generally speaking what locations, we're still not 100% sure of exactly where it is. And I also would like to stress the fact that even though it sounds like that we do have no idea what we're talking about, there's actually a really, really good amount of certainty with this system. We're really honing in on the nitty-gritty details of this cyclone. It is a very rare situation where we can predict a tropical cyclone's landfall's exact whereabouts within about 20 kilometers, more than about 12 hours in advance, and we're trying to do that with Tropical Cyclone Alfred, which is why pretty much every forecast is sounding so murky at this time, because we actually do, generally speaking, have a reasonably good idea of where this tropical cyclone is going to be going, and we also have a very good idea on what impacts can be expected, which leads me nicely on into the next part of the video. And this is where we're going to be talking about peak wind speeds and gusts around the southeastern corner of Queensland, where they are going to be really significant indeed. So as this tropical cyclone moves along to the coastline, we're going in chronological order here, those winds are going to begin to pick up for the northeastern corner of New South Wales, where wind gusts up in excess of 115 kilometres an hour are possible much later on tonight into early tomorrow morning, before increasing to 125 kilometres an hour by about lunchtime tomorrow. Peak wind gusts up to 145, pushing up to 150 kilometres an hour as the tropical cyclone makes landfall on Stradbroke Island sometime later on, or very late on Friday night into early Saturday morning, are expected between Moreton Island, including Moreton Island, down through both north and south Stradbroke Island, through the Gold Coast, and then down towards Tweed Heads. And as far south as Byron Bay, can expect wind gusts, I repeat, between 140 and 150 kilometres an hour later on tomorrow night and into early Saturday morning as Tropical Cyclone Alfred makes landfall. Peak wind gusts in the Gold Coast area will peak out at about 150 kilometres an hour on the coastline. They're actually likely to be a little bit weaker than that right now, just considering the lack of strengthening that we've seen from Tropical Cyclone Alfred today, but at a worst case scenario, 150 kilometre an hour winds to the Gold Coast and into the more suburban areas out towards Nerang, winds between 100 to 130 kilometres an hour. I would just like to take this opportunity to say that wind gusts up to 125 kilometres an hour, generally speaking, isn't going to be much of a problem for southeast Queensland. Yes, it will cause some tree damage and power line failures here and there, and it could take the roof off some very poorly built homes and carports, but generally speaking, 125 kilometres an hour, it's not unprecedented, and it does happen pretty much every year in this part of Queensland. coastline. It's along the coast where we're talking about these winds, and up to on the Stradbroke Island system, and even as far north as Moreton Island, where we're talking about these winds that could top out at 150 kilometers an hour or even stronger. That's going to cause some major problems, that's for sure, up towards Point Lookout and Amity Point. I know that these population centre, or I mean, it's a bit of a stretch to call some of these locations population centres, but these areas here will definitely struggle with damage from Tropical Cyclone Alfred, just considering how strong these winds are going to be. Redland City wind gusts should be about 130 kilometres an hour at a maximum on Friday night into early Saturday morning, easing off pretty quickly as this cyclone makes its landfall. Brisbane, I don't think they get the metro area and the northern suburbs especially will pick up winds more than about 120 kilometres an hour. Southern suburbs down towards Logan City up to about 125 kilometres an hour there. Along the North Brisbane coastline though, so around the airport, the harbour, and then up towards Redcliffe, and even as far north as Caboolture and up towards Caloundra and Bribie Island, when this tropical cyclone moves over the Brisbane metro area or through the Moreton Bay area on the backside of this system early Saturday morning and towards early Saturday afternoon, when those winds swing around from the north on the backside of this system, we'll be seeing some very strong winds move into these areas as well. We could be seeing gusts up to about 125 kilometres an hour. They will pale in comparison to those peak gusts on the Stradbroke Island system and up towards Moreton Bay, but still some really significant wind gusts can be expected on the backside of the tropical cyclone around the Moreton Bay coastline, especially around the Brisbane coastline up here, around the harbour and up towards the airport. So it's really good. It's really a good thing that the airport has been closed to this tropical cyclone event. Obviously, no planes can take off or land, reasonably speaking, in these wind gusts. So again, it is really good that all the necessary precautions and warnings have been taken very seriously by every official agency around the Brisbane area, which is again very good to see. Winds up on the Sunshine Coast seldom stronger than about 95 kilometres an hour. You'll get some strong gusts here and there, but they shouldn't be too strong, that's for sure. And those winds will die off pretty much completely as this tropical cyclone moves inland, and especially for locations north of Noosa, nothing in the way of crazy wind gusts can be expected there. Strong winds out into the Gold Coast hinterland as well, up to about 125 kilometres an hour, but once again, they'll pale in comparison to the winds that are expected along the coastline. I'd also like to talk about the rainfall forecast this system here. It is still a little bit uncertain. I'm going to keep this very short and sweet because it goes without saying that with the tropical cyclone, there's plenty of rainfall coming through. If you do live in a flood-prone area, I strongly recommend checking out the update that I released about 6 hours ago from the time of posting this forecast update. I will leave a link in the pinned comments as well. I strongly recommend you checking that out, but time doesn't permit for me to go over the flooding risks right now, but I'll leave a link to the exact parts of the video that you want for the flooding risk. It's very important that you take a look at those because in New South Wales, especially and for southeast Queensland, some really significant flash flooding and riverine flooding can be expected. And the same deal for the wave forecast as well. I strongly advise you checking out the previous forecast update, but in terms of storm surge, this is a very important factor of the forecast. Moreton Bay more or less excluded from this, but for locations between Maroochydore right down towards Yamba in the northeastern corner of New South Wales, you can expect a storm tide from this tropical cyclone between 0.5 metre up to 2.5 metres above the highest astronomical tide as Tropical Cyclone Alfred makes landfall sometime tomorrow night. If it coincides with the highest tide or the high tide mark around the Gold Coast area, some really significant inundation can be expected. And another factor of the forecast that's been overlooked by a lot of other agencies is the fact that the amount of water trying to exit the canal system and the river system from both the Nerang rivers and the Coomera rivers, we could be seeing some really significant flooding in both rivers respectively. But the amount of water that's going to be trying to exit those rivers after the rainfall that's going to come through tonight into tomorrow morning, which could be a couple of 100 millimeters for some of these areas, will then meet the storm surge and the storm tide that's going to be trying to rush into the canals, and that's going to create a massive backlog of water. And as such, a storm surge will actually be at its worst in the canal system around the Gold Coast, where we could be seeing coastal inundations about 4 meters above the average high tide mark. So some really significant coastal inundations can be expected there. It's now too late to continue preparations. You need to be hunkering down for this tropical cyclone. I mean, the radar image tells it all. Here, plenty of rainfall moving through into the Gold Coast right now, and it's too dangerous to be outside preparing for this tropical cyclone. So if you haven't sandbagged, get yourself up into a secure part of the second story of your house. But apart from that, you're just going to have to ride out this tropical cyclone now and hope for the best. It is a significant impact in the making. I strongly advise everybody to be sandbagging around the canal system and within 100 meters of a creek or a body of water around the Gold Coast area. That includes Nerang and areas out towards the Gold Coast hinterland as well. And I really hope that people have heeded that advice because it was very good advice and certainly advice that people needed to be following. but at this time it's certainly too late to begin or continue preparations in these areas. And same deal for the northern rivers of New South Wales. Once again, I strongly advise you going to check out the video that I released a couple of hours ago, link in the pinned comments. Anyways, that is it for Tropical Cyclone Alfred. I've kept it short and sweet tonight. It's just a bit of an update on what this system is doing, and there'll be more updates tomorrow as well as this system churns offshore from Queensland. We'll wait and see what this system does motion-wise. There'll be updates on the Facebook page as well, so make sure you check them out. But in terms of the motion right now, very hard to tell exactly with what Tropical Cyclone is expected to do. It is certainly a powerful system and a menacing picture for Queensland and New South Wales, and wishing everybody over in Queensland and New South Wales my best through this tropical cyclone. I hope that everybody has prepared for the absolute worst and is hoping for the best right now. A really significant tropical cyclone impact is in the making here, and it will be historic for parts of Queensland and New South Wales. Certainly a weather event never before seen in this part of Australia. Very, very significant and very scary and dangerous stuff as well. But stay calm, stay cool, stay collected in an event like this, and make sure you are ready with your family to ride out the storm. It is too late to evacuate. It's too late to continue preparations. Just hunker down and enjoy Tropical Cyclone Alfred's wrath as it rages around southeast Queensland and northeastern New South Wales. A special shout out, of course, to the channel sponsors. Their names are on screen right now, and again, I could not run this show without them, and their support is much appreciated. And a massive thank you to all of those that have joined the channel recently as well. Their support is much appreciated too. But that is all from me this afternoon and evening, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.